Okay, I guess that's the signal. Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to the Westport Library. I'm Bill Hamer, the Executive Director of the library. Thank you for coming out and supporting this event. The library is a proud sponsor and partner of the annual Team Westport Teen Diversity Essay Contest. We are very excited and privileged to welcome this year's young essayists as they share with us their explorations around a difficult and challenging concept. Democracy happens when interested people engage in informed discussion. As such, I don't know about you folks, but I can't think of a better environment than the public library for members of the community to engage in discussions and dialogue around issues that are important to them and their community. The library serves as a conversation starter by bringing topical issues to light in a safe, unbiased environment, where all opinions are valued and all opinions are heard. So without further delay, it is my privilege to welcome to the stage our esteemed First Selectwoman, Jen Tooker.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome, especially welcome to our essay writers and winners. I've been lucky enough for the last couple of years as your second Selectwoman to attend this awards ceremony. And what I've always found wonderful about this evening is that the prompt is always very provocative, but the essays are incredibly well written and really very insightful. And so I know we will have that again tonight in our finalists. And I do want to say congratulations to everybody who actually submitted an essay. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, and a special congratulations and a special welcome to our finalists. So with that, I would like to welcome to the microphone the chair of Team Westport Committee, Harold Bailey.
Thanks, Jen. And thanks you all for being here in person and in the Zoom world out there somewhere as well. I do want you to know that in the 19-year history of Team Westport, there is no initiative of which we're more proud than the Teen Diversity Essay Contest. This is our 9th year, and it is also an initiative which has garnered us the greatest acclaim and respect for the town of Westport. From school systems regionally, statewide, and nationally to CNN at one point, the stature of the town of Westport has been raised, and the town has responded to the insights of youth with a combination of respect, pride, and often awe. And I'm here to tell you that tonight, that tradition is going to continue in fine fashion. We've got 3 excellent essays. Our finalists this year are Ian Patton. Ian, if you'd stand. Thank you. Colin Morgeson. And Lee Foran. I also wanted to acknowledge the presence of a couple of public school dignitaries. Tom Scarice, superintendent, is with us. Anthony Bono, our assistant superintendent. And Staples principal, Stratford Thomas. Excuse me, Stafford, I'm sorry. I've got a friend, anyway. Well, every year, the way this works is that the essays are submitted, and after the essays are submitted, we have an individual who takes those essays and redacts anything on them that resembles a name or might give the judges an opportunity to figure out who it is that's has written that essay. I want to recognize that person tonight, and that's Margaret Pinheiro, who every year, Margaret, if you'd stand up. This flat out just doesn't work without Margaret, who does a tremendous amount of work to get things ready for the judges. But to get to that point, let me introduce the head of our committee for essays and also the person who is the brainchild of the essay contest itself, Susan Ellis.
Just a few words about how we come up with our topic every year. It is a challenge. We have a small subgroup of Team Westport, which includes some teachers, both from Greens Farms Academy and from Staples. And they often come up with an idea that they are noticing their own students are struggling with or are interested in or sometimes curious about. And then this small group, and I am part of that, works it over until we think we have something good, and then we distribute it to the entire group. We used to do this in a meeting pre-COVID, but of course this last year it's been through email. And this year, interestingly enough, we got one slight suggestion for a little tweak, a word or something I'm not remembering now, and that was it. The rest of the group said, great. So that's a good feeling, and I hope you enjoy the essays. I loved reading them, I have to say. I'm going to tell you who our judges are. Dr. Judy Hamer is our chief judge. She's not able to be with us physically tonight, but we have a video of her explaining how the judges work. And Alex Giannini, who is the Associate Director of Programs and Events here at the library and seems to do everything, is one of our judges. And Ramin Ganeshram, who is the president of the Museum of History and Culture and a published author herself, is one of our judges. A very distinguished group. And now you'll hear from Dr. Judy Hamer.
I'm delighted that all of you have come out tonight to celebrate the winners of the Team Westport Diversity Essay Contest. I'm here to tell you a bit about the rubric that we've used for several years to judge these essays. And then I want to illustrate some of the parts of that rubric with excerpts from the essays. So basically, there are 5 measurements that we're looking for that are really characteristic of all effective nonfiction writing. They are the ideas. What are the ideas that the person has expressed, and are they expressed logically? That brings us to the next portion, which is the organization, because the ideas have to be laid out so that the reader can understand those ideas without any previous knowledge of the subject. Then the voice. The voice is pretty interesting because in order to engage a reader, and these are really all reader-based criteria, in order to engage a reader, you have to feel as if there's a human being behind the writing, as if the writing wasn't written by a robot, but by a person. There's word choice. Are the words appropriate to the topic and to the expected audience? There's sentence fluency. Do the sentences flow together? Does the second sentence seem like a logical extension of the first sentence? And finally, there are conventions. You all know about conventions: paragraphing, periods, commas, semicolons, grammar. So that is the overall idea. But what I'd like to do in order to make this come alive is to read to you some excerpts from the essays that you will hear tonight. And I'd like to start with one essay where the voice is really clear and grabs the reader. This is the first paragraph. I don't identify with my race. Aha! So what are you talking about? My whiteness is inherently a part of who I am and how I move through the world. but the way I see myself, mind and body, has next to nothing to do with my race. When I look in the mirror, I recognize my face, my hair, my skin, but I don't see whiteness. That's an example of voice. You know that someone specific has thought these thoughts and is getting them down. From another award-winning essay. This is a little more subtle because it has to do with sentence fluency, how one sentence follows the next one, and the writer does something very interesting in the second sentence. This is from the second paragraph of an essay. The entire discussion had been prompted by a rather contentious subject, critical race theory. You've heard about it in the news, or maybe you've seen the signs around town, or maybe you've even been vocal about your belief on whether or not it belongs in the classroom. Critical race theory is a simple concept. Race is a social construct, and racist elements are present in American institutions. Okay, that's fluency because one, you may or may not like the ideas, but one sentence follows another. You can see the writer's thought, how he or she got from the first sentence to the last sentence that I read you. The third example is one of the best examples of organization that I've seen in a long time. This writer is talking about enhancing privilege to tackle racism. And the thesis is that you can't talk about racism without talking about white privilege. Now, that may or may not be so, but listen to just the first sentence of each paragraph. First, conversations about race and privilege are not meant to expose white people. Then we've got a paragraph that backs up that thought. Second, the ironic quality of privilege is that its absence triggers our awareness. Okay, something to think about. Third, conversations about race are not complete without acknowledging privilege. We know exactly how this thought is flowing because the writer is giving us guidelines. Fourth, the silence surrounding privilege is the key problem here. You may agree, you may not disagree, you know exactly what the writer thinks. Finally, we're getting to the end. Having white privilege is not a character flaw. You will hear or you will read each of these essays today or at some future point. So you'll be able to see the context and the content that I've been trying to illustrate for you. But I just wanted to say congratulations to the winners. You've done an excellent job in a really challenging subject. And I think that students and parents and adults and teachers and brothers and sisters and relatives and onlookers should all be really happy and pleased with what you've taken on. Congratulations.
And let me give that congratulations as well in person. 1 second. So to get on with things now, let's talk about the challenge that was given this year in the essay contest. And I'll read that first. Why can it be so difficult to talk about race? Trevor Noah, award-winning comedian, writer, and television host from South Africa, says, "The first thing we have to do in any conversation is figure out what the words mean in a conversation that we're having," end quote. In 1,000 words or fewer, describe what you would like to explain to people in your community who avoid or struggle with talking about race or acknowledging systemic racism, or who apply a colorblind approach to issues. So, let's get started. Our first winner for third place is Lee Foran for her essay on why it can be so difficult to talk about race, entitled "Embracing Privilege to Tackle Racism." Lee? Great. Got your essay? Well, anyway, that's what it looks like, and there really is a check. I'll let you go ahead and get started. Thank you.
I don't think we can talk about race without talking about privilege, without exploring the extensive, systematic disparities and historic inequities that have plagued people of color for centuries. Because privilege is both the cause and effect of racism, genuine conversations about race inevitably coalesce into deeper discussions. They force people to acknowledge their own privilege, and this can be an uncomfortable and jarring experience. As such, conversations about race can be difficult because recognizing privilege can feel like a personal attack. White privilege has been a long-standing fixture of American society. However, many people get defensive when the conversation turns to this topic. I recently heard a parent in town express his concern that discussing the idea of white privilege in school would make his children question themselves. He said, "I don't want them feeling bad because they're white." I was disappointed when I heard this, because his perspective represents a widely held misconception. Many white people feel that privilege undermines their success and is solely meant to put them down. But using this discomfort to avoid conversation impedes progress. This type of thinking prevents people from coming to grips with the reality of white privilege, and we have to break through these fears to have meaningful discussion. To prompt more people to join in on the conversation, I think it's important to acknowledge the following truths. First, conversations about race and privilege are not meant to expose white people. These discussions may feel like a direct attack on oneself, one's achievements, or one's successes. But in reality, having conversations about race and privilege isn't about vilifying advantaged groups. In her groundbreaking essay, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, Peggy McIntosh writes, "I have come to see white privilege as an invisible package of unearned assets which I can count on cashing in each day, but about which I was meant to remain oblivious." Nowhere does she imply that acknowledging privilege is meant to demonize white people. A conversation about race is not a personal attack. Instead, we can use this dialogue to understand privilege. This will allow us to develop a more equitable community. Second, the ironic quality of privilege is that its absence triggers our awareness, not its presence. McIntosh calls white privilege an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provisions, maps, passports, code books, visas, clothes, tools, and blank checks. People who have privilege oftentimes aren't aware of the way it helps them, oblivious to the unearned advantages they have over others. But people of color are oftentimes very aware that they lack the same resources and face more implicit bias than their privileged counterparts. Knowing this, conversations are essential to understanding one's own privilege. Third, conversations about race are not complete without acknowledging privilege, the ways race disadvantages some while it puts others at an advantage. Most people are outraged by the blatant ways race can be a disadvantage, how people of color are subject to atrocious hate crimes. But a holistic approach to stopping racism also requires solving a more subtle problem, one of privilege. A true commitment to rooting out systemic racism takes more than outrage at hate crimes. It takes acknowledging and talking about privilege. This is largely why the colorblind approach to combating racism doesn't work. It fails to address the inherent advantages certain groups in society possess. By viewing everyone as the same, we ignore how white Americans enjoy privileges denied to people of color. We will fall under the false impression that we live in a meritocratic society, unable to address the inequitable impacts of privilege. Fourth, the silence surrounding privilege is the key problem here. Constant denials and stigmatization of the issue keep privilege invisible, an unseen contributor to the vast systemic racism present in American workplaces, educational facilities, and communities. But we can use conversation to remedy this and shatter the silence. There is a burgeoning need for more conversation about race. Most people who have privilege aren't aware of it, so we can create a more conscientious community by discussing the social, political, economic, and cultural impacts of privilege. Finally, having white privilege is not a character flaw. Like the father who was concerned about his kids, discussing privilege makes too many people feel like a figurative finger is being pointed at them, accusing them of perpetuating bias and hatred. They get defensive and reject the assumption that they are a part of the problem. It's time to change the way we see privilege. Conversations are not meant to blame or call people out. They help us understand the causes and impacts of racial inequity. In spite of all this, so many approach conversations about race with emotionally charged opposition and discomfort. This form of defensiveness hinders the conversation, making it harder to explore privilege and combat racism through civil discourse. Some deny the existence of privilege, citing that many white people have struggled and worked hard to achieve success. But the idea of privilege is not meant to undermine the fact that many white people have overcome difficulties and worked hard to achieve their achievements. Simply put, privilege is a congenital advantage separate from what someone earns or achieves during their lifetime. It's easy to decry hate crimes or to make a social media post condemning racist violence, but this is not enough. Too many hide behind the superficial mask of outrage, but don't take action. Addressing the systemic racism in our society requires a deeper response, and we can use conversation as a starting point in fighting privilege and driving systemic change. We cannot achieve the next phase of racial equality without conscious, purposeful involvement. Learning to embrace conversations instead of denying the discomfort is a step more of us can take. Conversations about race expose privilege, and having the courage to engage is crucial.
Thank you, Lee. We're gonna take some pictures now. So I'm gonna ask Stafford, Jen, Bill, Tom, if you would join us. Congratulations. I'm gonna leave your check here for you. Great. That's great. Just get out in the center here. And now for second place, for his essay, Villains of Our Stories, Colin Morgeson. Colin, leave this down here. No, I'm not.
What's wrong with talking about race? It was an ordinary lunch period at Staples High School, and on this particular day, my friend and I had elected not to share amusing stories or interesting developments from our lives. No, instead we had decided to discuss racism and education. For the past 10 minutes, I had been trying to understand why he was adamantly opposed to schools teaching kids about inequalities present in society today. If today's kids are soon entering such a society, what should stand between them and learning about topics related to the very nature of their world? My friend was quick to answer my aforementioned question. Because kids shouldn't be taught to hate each other. The entire discussion had been prompted by a rather contentious subject, critical race theory. You've heard about it in the news, or maybe you've seen the signs around town, or maybe you've even been vocal about your belief on whether or not it belongs in the classroom. CRT is a simple concept. Race is a social construct, and racist elements are present in American institutions. I've always found the debate around CRT uniquely fascinating, because no matter your stance on the issue, everyone seems to agree that it's an especially divisive issue. Such a simple concept has long been the subject of nationwide debates, and even today, politicians move to ban CRT from their state schools' curriculums. Clearly, the subject strikes a very particular chord with the masses, triggering particularly potent emotions. Both my friend and opponents of critical race theory place focus on the inherent ties between societal racism and pride. Indeed, as humans, conversations about our race, people that look like us, people that have experienced things like us, people that are treated like us, have a certain gravitas, naturally prompting us to defend the honors of those that are similar to us. And it's from this that concerns of hating each other spring. When white people read about the legacies of the founding fathers falling under question, it's only natural that their collective sense of pride feels under attack. When minorities read about the persistence of the wealth gap, it's only natural that pride compels them to feel indignation. As someone of both white and minority descent, I'm fortunate enough to have been exposed to multiple sides of racial issues, but large swaths of the population exist in more homogeneous communities. For someone who spent their entire life surrounded by people like them, why wouldn't other racial groups become the villains of their story? This complex, conflict-prone landscape of tribalism naturally leads people to avoid race-related discussions entirely. But should they? Racism is an illness, an affliction of the soul that our country has long struggled to vanquish, and a disease that will probably never be completely eradicated. It certainly won't vanish of its own accord. No, in order to properly treat it, citizens need to make an active effort. And this begins with awareness of systemic racism and its effects. The wealth gap, hate crimes, and police brutality won't disappear with plenty of water and a good night's rest. No, citizens need to be aware of these issues. And awareness is born from discussion. Without discussion, without acknowledgement, without action, we allow the malady to roam unchecked, spreading through the cells that are our communities and taking root in the body that is the United States of America. Whether we like it or not, the illness will continue its merciless rampage, and the symptoms will persevere. Every now and then, a flare-up will occur, temporarily drawing attention towards some poor soul who's been gripped by the disease. Of course, this can't go on forever. Such an ailment is unsustainable. Do you know what happens when an infection goes untreated? Catastrophe. If pride serves to inflame the disease, then perhaps the proper anti-inflammatory agents in our conversations are humility, level-headedness, and compassion. People shouldn't be taught to hate each other, but that doesn't mean we can't acknowledge the world we reside in, faults and all, in order to make it better. My friend has reservations about the teaching of systemic racism in our schools, but as someone who represents a racial minority himself, he recognizes the need for our society to commit to fighting discrimination. Furthermore, his willingness to share his views and experiences with me proves that despite concerns of divisiveness, he accepts the need to communicate about race in an environment he knows is receptive. Indeed, talking about societal racism is essential, and though it's not always easy, a proper approach can turn potential divisiveness into productivity. Through humility, we can accept the reality of our world, past and present. Through level-headedness, we can understand that it's our actions that ultimately define us. Through compassion, we can empathize with the plight of others and seek to cure our world as best as we can. Through discussion, we take the first step into becoming the heroes of our stories.
A check.
Thank you.
Have everybody come up again. Let's get, we're going to take pictures again. Thank you. I should say also the checks are for real money. And Lee's check was for $500. That last check was for $750, and much deserved. So, and now for our first place winner. No surprise, it's Ian Patton, who will read his essay, "How to Be a Good White Person." Yeah, I want to make sure this.
I can bend a little.
Okay, I can lift it up.
We're good. No, we're okay.
I said I can do that. Let's see. Yeah, there we go.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't identify with my race. My whiteness is inherently a part of who I am and how I move through the world. But the way I see myself, mind and body, has next to nothing to do with my race. When I look in the mirror, I recognize my face, my hair, my skin. But I don't see whiteness. This isn't a claim that I'm somehow race blind. There's a difference, for me at least, between identifying with your race and identifying as your race. The former implies a deeper connection to the label, one that means an additional connection to a community. But whiteness doesn't come with a community. We have the ability to ignore our race and develop a cultural identity completely separate from it, simply because we are treated as the default. We see people that we've been taught to think look like us everywhere, and they see us as like them. That's part of what it means to live in a white supremacist society. The white presence, even if it's not in the majority, is the baseline, the standard. White people living within the society don't have to do any work to figure out their identity. They can live comfortably without thinking about race. We don't have to think about race. That's an opportunity afforded uniquely to white people. We're intrinsically seen as complete individuals, but this construction of identity separate from race means that we lose individual facets as well as the access to a community. The construct of race benefits us, so questioning it doesn't come naturally, and most importantly, it's uncomfortable. Given a head start and an advantage in every walk of life, we're desensitized to the feelings of white privilege. I notice it when I'm taught by a non-white teacher and suddenly whiteness doesn't dominate the classroom. I notice it when I'm looking at a collage of presidents and the 44th stands out while the others spark no reaction. I notice it when I hear someone I know say something racist, but I don't know how to respond. My whiteness allows me to expect certain treatment and be unaware, or ignorant, rather, of the feeling of being treated as less than. Essentially, white thresholds of comfort are much different from systematically oppressed racial minorities, especially when it comes to discomfort about race-related topics. Being able to discuss and think critically about race is a skill, one that doesn't come naturally because race isn't natural. Non-white people gather a lifetime's worth of personal experience that makes them experts on racism, and by extension, experts on white people. On the flip side, white people can safely live without caring about systematic racism. We can live our entire lives and still be uninformed. The white experience doesn't enable its people to understand race. It just enables us to enforce racism on to the next generation. We have lifetimes of experiences that teach us to, subconsciously or consciously, view people who look different from us as different from us. Challenging these implicit biases is difficult for everyone, but especially white people who haven't fully worked through their own relationships with race. We have to acknowledge that our brains are wired in ways that hurt entire communities, but that can easily trigger fragility responses, especially when our ignorance causes harm to the people of color around us. When we lash out or shut down after being made uncomfortable, that is evidence of the work we have to do. And white discomfort is dangerous. It's what causes so many potential allies and accomplices to shy away from activism. If we can't handle being held accountable, and if we can't learn about our history and reality without feeling personally attacked, we are useless to the fight against white supremacy. White people, you don't have to be perfect at everything you do. In fact, wanting to be the perfect white person is a symptom of white supremacy. But you can want to be good. What you need to do is understand that your imperfections are going to cause harm. Your mistakes will cause harm. And the first step towards improving yourself is to look at yourself and where you're lacking. Work through your thoughts and feelings and traumas and prepare yourself for the hard conversations, the conversations that need to happen. White people as a community need to come together and help each other through our racism. We need to reclaim our own identities beyond and through our whiteness, so that we can live and work as fuller human beings. We need to call each other out on our racism, because we're the only ones who won't be hurt by the microaggressions and self-defensiveness that follows. Racism was created by people who look like us, so we need to do the work and fix it. It's a responsibility. Fancy. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, still hanging around for a little bit. And of course, Ian walked off the stage with a check for $1,000. Congratulations. That's excellent, excellent. I want to congratulate all three of the essayists tonight for just incredible insights. And what I find really amazing about all three essays is the degree to which the clarity that they expressed across the board in diagnosing what the problem was, and also in providing solutions from their different perspectives. It's really amazing what was done here, and I will guarantee you that those three essays will be added with a great deal of pride by us all to the great foundation of essays we have already. So you've done us proud. Thanks again, and congratulations. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you next year.